Sometimes closing a limited company is a decision that cannot be avoided. And most directors make it far more painful than it needs to be. And it's simply because they don't understand the process. Now, what normally happens is a director will go onto Google and perhaps put, how do I close my limited company? And then generally in one of three positions. The company's dormant, it's no longer needed, it's profitable and they want to exit, or it's under pressure and it can't pay its debts. Now, these are three completely different situations, and the route you choose matters massively. Now, if you close a company the wrong way, you can get HMRC to object, it can create personal liability, you can face an investigation, and you can make the situation worse. Now, if you close it properly, you choose the right option for your situation, you can protect yourself and move on cleanly. And today I'm going to explain every option properly, easily, so you understand. Now, the first question you've got to ask yourself is my company solvent or insolvent? And everything starts here. A company is solvent if it can basically pay its debts on time. It's insolvent if you can't pay your debts on time. Or your liabilities exceed your assets. So let's say you're in a time to pay arrangement, you've not paid HMRC and you can't pay your next VAT bill, it's a sign you're insolvent. And if you total up all what you owe and it's more than what you own in assets, cash, that's the balance sheet test. You're insolvent. Now, this question determines everything because directors get into trouble when they pretend insolvency isn't insolvency. Okay, so I want to go through these options. First option is you strike the company off. It's a voluntary dissolution and it's easy peasy, really, really simple. You apply to Companies House on the website using a form called a DS01. And after 3 months, if no one objects, the company dissolves, it disappears, it no longer exists. Now, a strike-off is appropriate really if the company's got no debts, it's not trading, there's no disputes, it might be dormant, there's no assets in the business, there's no HMRC arrears, there's certainly no bounce back loan. And if you can answer yes to all of those, it's dead clean, it's cheap, and it's literally you fill in a form, you submit it online, I think you spend about 33 quid now, and the company will disappear. Now, when a strike-off is dangerous is if your company owes money. If you owe a bounce back loan, a strike-off isn't going to work. If you owe HMRC, there's a chance the strike-off won't work. Suppliers will object to it, okay? Now, if you owe HMRC money and you try to strike the company off, the chances are HMRC will object to it. Now, if you owe HMRC sort of £5,000, £10,000, £15,000 and you want to try this route, you've got to inform HMRC what you're doing. So you can write to them and say, HMRC, listen, the business is no longer trading, it has no cash, it has no assets, and I'm going to try and strike the business off. If you are letting them know what's happening, there's a good chance they might take the view and go, well, there's nothing in this business, we can't recover anything from the director, therefore we'll let it be struck off, okay? Now, another thing is called an MVL, Members Voluntary Liquidation. Now, this process is if your company's solvent. So basically you can pay all your debts in full, and after that you've got retained profits of, I'd say, over 30,000 quid. And what an MVL allows you to do is extract those funds as capital rather than income, okay? So you might be a director who's retiring, or the company's restructuring, or the group structure is being simplified. And it's a tax efficient way of closing a solvent business. Now, there are still some important points with MVLs. You've got to swear a statutory declaration of solvency. Now, if you get that wrong, it can become a serious legal issue. But an MVL is a powerful way of closing a company down, extracting the funds to shareholders, but you can only use it when genuinely you can pay everybody back. Now, option 3 is a creditors voluntary liquidation. And this is the most common closure for companies that have become insolvent, okay? And a liquidation, a CVL, applies when a company cannot pay its debts. The directors have got to take a look at it and go, yeah, I'm insolvent, but this is an important thing. It's not just about being insolvent on a cash flow and a balance sheet basis. It's about, in your heart of hearts, there's no way that the business will get back to profitability. Because loads of companies might be insolvent throughout the year for reasons beyond your control. Perhaps someone's not paid you and you've not been able to pay other people. But if you ask yourself the question, will I ever get back on a firm financial footing in this business? And the answer is no. Really, it's down for you to actually do something about it and choose to put the business into liquidation voluntarily. Now, what happens in a liquidation is trading stops. The business ceases to trade. You find an insolvency practitioner and you appoint the insolvency practitioner. If there's any assets in the business, they are realised, and the idea is to get some money back to creditors. All your creditors get informed off the insolvency practitioner of the pending liquidation. Now, the insolvency practitioner has got to review your conduct. That's what their job is. And eventually, when all the investigation's done, the insolvency service have got the report about your conduct. In about 12 months' time, the company is then dissolved. Now, some of the important things about liquidation is people go, well, what's going to happen to my debts? Well, company debts will remain with the company, and they get written off in a liquidation. They don't become personal debts. You end up getting personally liable for debts if you've signed a personal guarantee. There's a thing called an overdrawn director's loan account, and if you owe the company money, you will be pursued by the insolvency practitioner to pay back. If you've done anything wrong, if there's any serious misconduct like wrongful trading, there's a chance you could be made personally liable there. But for most directors, they're protected. You know, they've not done anything wrong, and if they've acted early enough, it's a very straightforward process. Now, listen, by the way, if I've said anything so far that's made you think, oh, I perhaps need to speak to him, if you go down to the comment section, you put your details into that link, one of my team will call you today, free and independent advice. We are number one on TripAdvisor. We're number one on Trustpilot by a country mile, and yeah, we'll help you understand what your options are, okay? Now, there is another option. It's called administration. And administration is used when there is still a viable core business and a rescue is possible. Or by going into admin provides a better return to creditors than what can be achieved in a liquidation. Got to remember, in liquidation, things are sold at a fire sale. In administration, generally, things are sold for a higher value, which provides a better return to creditors. Now, the benefits of administration is it stops an illegal action. There is a wall of protection around the company. It protects the company assets and preserves the value. And it can allow us for a sale of the business. And a lot of times it will preserve jobs for people. Now, it is more complex and it is more costly than liquidation, but in the right situation, it's the correct tool. Now, any of these scenarios, you're probably asking, well, what's going to happen to me personally? Because this is what most directors really care about. Now, you've got to understand limited liability still exists, usually, right? Most directors are not personally liable for company debts unless, again, you've signed a personal guarantee, okay? Or you owe the company money, or you've traded wrongfully or fraudulently, and there's a thing called preference payments, okay? When you become insolvent, you've got to be careful who you pay. And if you decide to pay your friend or a certain supplier that you've perhaps personally guaranteed at the death of the company, and the insolvency practitioner sees that you've paid them basically in preference of everyone else, there's a good chance you could be made personally liable. Now, also, bounce back loan fraud. If you have committed any type of bounce back loan fraud, that will get picked up by the insolvency practitioner. And again, we're seeing more and more directors being made personally liable for bounce back loans, okay? Now, just an FYI, Company closure does not equal personal bankruptcy, okay? But remember, you still may have some personal exposure, and for you as a director, you need to review all of this at once so you understand what's going to happen if you do go down one of the voluntary insolvency routes. Now, people get worried about HMRC, okay, when they're closing the company. Now, you've got to remember is HMRC is really, I mean, it's another creditor legally, okay? But practically, they're a little bit more powerful. They are preferential creditors. And also, if you go to try and strike the company off and you owe HMRC, it's highly HMRC will object to the strike off and therefore frustrate the process. Now, if you are a director who has done loads of liquidations where you put a business through an insolvency, you leave a shed load of HMRC debt and you start again, you are now on their radar, okay? HMRC are not rolling over in 2026. Now, I've done this job for a long time and I see directors make a lot of mistakes. And mistake number one is they wait too long. They just don't want to accept that company closure, certainly insolvency, is the right option for them. So they bury their head in the sands, they hope for it's going to be a better month, maybe this work will come in. And I'm a big believer of positive thinking, but it can get dangerous. You know, you've got to look at things as they are and not worse than they are. Another thing that directors do all the time is they use VAT as working capital. And it's easy to do, isn't it? You know, you pay your VAT once every quarter. So you're essentially holding 20% of the government's money. And if you're having a tight month, and I get it, you might have 20 grand in a VAT account, or even worse, you've not got it in a VAT account, but you know within your bank balance, some of that money's VAT. But you've got to pay a supplier on Friday, otherwise they won't release the goods. Or you haven't got enough money to pay wages and you think, you know what, I'm going to dip into the VAT money. And the problem is it doesn't get tapped up. You know, you think, right, I don't think anybody on purpose goes to screw HMRC. It just happens by mistake. You think things will get better. You miss this quarter's VAT payment and you know what, I'll get back on top of it next month. But you're not able to get back on top of it and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Another problem I see is people signing personal guarantees under pressure. You know, you will be offered money. When your business is struggling, there are lenders out there who are still going to offer you money, right? But they're going to want a personal guarantee. And this, you've got to be careful here. Listen, there are times where a PG is necessary. But again, I've done this job a long time. And what it actually does for a lot of directors is it turns in business debt that would die with a company in an insolvency into personally guaranteed debt. And you've got to be careful. If you are signing a PG, you need to be 100% sure that by signing it, you're going to get yourself out of the mire, okay? Now, again, I touched on it earlier, preference payments. If you, at the end, pay certain creditors, not others, you're basically treating them preferentially. That is an issue that can bite you on the arse, okay? Now, most personal disasters happen before liquidation, okay? And a lot of people could be made aware of these problems if they sought advice early enough, okay? So here is the step-by-step on how to close the business properly, okay? If you're solvent, clear the debts, finalise the tax, and decide whether it's a strike-off or an MVL. Document it properly, okay? I think, you know, if you pay everyone off and you've got less than £30,000, I'd probably draw it as income as opposed to an MVL, because an MVL is going to cost you a few £1,000s. If when all's said and done you've got over 30 grand in the account, maybe an MVL is going to be the right option for you. You're going to need an insolvency practitioner for that. But if you're insolvent, you've got to make a call. Should I stop trading? Am I ever going to get past this? And the answer is no. The chances are you should stop trading. And reach out quickly. You know, speak to someone like us today and assess your personal exposure. You know, what PGs have you signed? Have you got an overdrawn director's loan account? What are you going to do about that overdrawn loan account? once the business goes through an insolvency process? Is it an administration you need? Is it liquidation? Timing's everything. But again, you've got to act early, you've got to speak to somebody. Now, closing a company, it doesn't have to be shameful. It is a legal tool designed to deal with business reality. It happens all the time, especially in 2026. The danger is not the closure, the danger is misunderstanding the closure. The danger is misunderstanding the personal exposure. But if you're a UK director thinking about closing your limited company, don't guess, speak to us at Director first. We'll explain what route is best for you, what happens to the debts, what's going to happen to you personally, and how to close properly. There's always a solution, but only if you act early. Now, if you've found this video useful, and you want to find out the difference between admin and liquidation, I want you to point you over there to that video, and it'll explain everything, what admin's used for, what liquidation's used for, where it's a bit similar, where it's a little bit different. Thanks for your time, Chris Worden. God bless.